stepped into the house like a thought that didn't want to be spoken too loudly. The white marble floors stretched endlessly beneath her, cold, immaculate, almost confrontational in their perfection. Each slab caught the light in a way that made it feel alive, like something was watching. She adjusted the roll of designs tucked beneath her arm, pressing them closer to her ribs, as though they might steady the rhythm of her heart. Her heels clicked once. She paused. A man carrying timber crossed ahead of her, boots heavy, leaving behind faint ghosts of dust. She carefully stepped around. The house was still becoming itself, wires peeking from walls, ladders leaning like tired men, the scent of cement and ambition thick in the air. Nyala moved forward again, slower this time, her dress tailored, skin tight, a deliberate statement of discipline and control, clung to her form like a second decision she couldn't undo. The label mattered. It always did in rooms she wasn't yet invited to belong in. She held herself upright, shoulders square, careful not to brush against anything unfinished, anything that might stain her. The workers noticed her. They didn't stop entirely, but they faltered. A glance held a second too long. A murmur lowered into something quieter. She felt their eyes, like brief fingerprints across her back, across the line of her waist, across the careful architecture of her presence. Nyala kept walking. "I'm not here to be seen," she whispered to herself, barely moving her lips. But she knew better. You are always seen. A man near the staircase let out a low whistle, quickly swallowed when another worker elbowed him. Nyala didn't turn. She simply adjusted her grip on the designs again and walked on, threading her way through the skeleton of a future someone else had already imagined. Until the house opened. The transition was sudden, like stepping out of a held breath. The back doors were wide, unfinished, leading onto an expansive patio that stretched toward a garden, still waiting to be planted. And there, he stood there, Randolph Denisova. He didn't turn immediately. He didn't need to. There was something about him that claimed space without movement. The kind of presence that didn't announce itself. It assumed recognition. Nyala slowed. He stood with his hands loosely behind his back, weight shifting in a way that revealed the quiet heaviness of his body. His frame carried wealth, the way old buildings carried history. Thick, settled, undeniable. His stomach pressed slightly against the line of his shirt. Not hidden, not apologized for. It moved before he did. Subtle but certain. Then he turned. Not quickly, not fully at first. Just enough. His face followed his body like an afterthought, but his eyes arrived first. Sharp, unsettlingly awake. They moved across her in a single sweep that felt less like looking and more like measuring. Nyala stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved instead, lifting the edges of her designs, brushing softly against her arms, stirring the halo of hair into something alive. Randolph's gaze lingered there, on her hair, on the fullness of it, the way it reached outward, unapologetic, catching the light differently than the marble ever could. He tilted his head slightly, as though trying to understand something he had already decided. Well, he said at last, his voice low, smooth in the way expensive things often are. You certainly bring presence into a space. Nyala felt the words settle somewhere behind her ribs. Thank you, she replied, steady, though her fingers tightened against the rolled paper. His lips curved, not quite a smile. That hair of yours, he continued, stepping closer now, each movement deliberate. his weight shifting forward with a slow authority. It's quite something, architectural almost. Nyala held his gaze. I suppose, he went on, softer now, as though confiding something polite and dangerous all at once. It must be difficult to contain in spaces like this. A pause. Spaces that demand a certain restraint. The wind lifted again, moving through her afro as though in quiet defiance. Nyala's voice, when it came, was calm, but it carried something beneath it, something steady and immovable. Good design, she said, doesn't erase presence. Randolph's eyes sharpened, just slightly. No, he said, but it does decide which kinds of presence are allowed to remain. Silence followed. Not empty, tense, alive. Nyala shifted the designs from one arm to the other, grounding herself in the weight of her work, in the reason she was here. I didn't come to be contained, Mr. Denisova, she said. I came to build something worth looking at. For the first time, something real flickered across his face. Interest. He stepped closer, close enough now that the space between them felt intentional. Careful, he murmured. That sounds dangerously like ambition. Nyala met his gaze without flinching. It is. The corner of his mouth lifted. Good, he said quietly. I've grown very tired of people who apologize for that. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that lingers. The kind that decides things. Randolph glanced down at the designs under her arm, then back at her. Show me, he said. And just like that, the house, the marble, the watching eyes behind them, all of it faded, because something had begun. Randolph did not sit. He reviewed her designs the way a storm studies land before deciding where to fall. Hovering, circling, never fully settling. The sheets unfurled between them across a temporary table, their edges lifting slightly in the breeze that wandered in from the unfinished garden. Nyala stood opposite him, hands loosely clasped, though every muscle in her body held a quiet tension. He said nothing at first, only looked, and then, "Sir," a man approached from behind, breath uneven, boots still carrying dust. Randolph did not turn immediately. His eyes remained on the page in front of him, tracing a line Nyala had drawn with deliberate restraint. "Yes," he said, flat, controlled. "The stone delivery. There's a delay. They are saying then they're saying they don't want to be paid on time," Randolph replied, finally lifting his gaze, not to the man, but past him, as though already bored of the interruption. "Find another supplier, or give them a reason to remember why they agreed to the first contract." The man hesitated. Randolph looked at him then, rarely looked, and whatever lived behind that gaze ended the conversation. "Yes, sir," the man said quickly, retreating. Silence folded back in. Nyala exhaled slowly, though she hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Randolph moved to the next page. His fingers hovered just above the paper, not touching, as though contact might distort something he preferred to experience from a distance. "You understand space," he said at last. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. Nyala allowed herself a small nod. "I tried to listen to it first." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Approval, perhaps, though it refused to fully form. "Good," he murmured. Another interruption. A woman this time, tablet in hand, voice quick, efficient. "Mr. Denisova, the contractors are asking about the ceiling height in the west wing. The revised measurements tell them to stop asking questions they already know the answer to," he said, not unkindly, but without patience. "If they need reassurance, they're in the wrong profession." "Yes, sir." She left as quickly as she came. Randolph finally looked up at Nyala again. "Do you see?" he said, almost conversationally. "Noise." Nyala tilted her head slightly. "From them?" "From everything," he replied. He straightened, shifting his weight, his body following a half second behind the intention in his eyes. The fabric of his shirt pulled slightly across his midsection as he moved, but he carried it without self-consciousness. His presence did not ask permission from the room. It rewrote it. "I dismissed my last interior designer," he continued, stepping slowly along the length of the table. "Very talented on paper. Impressive references. The kind of person who believes taste is something you prove by accumulation." He glanced down at her designs again. They thought an unlimited budget meant permission to be loud. Nyala's fingers tightened slightly. Randolph's voice softened, not in kindness, but in precision. Gold where silence would have been richer. Texture, layered upon texture, until the room forgot how to breathe. Every corner begging to be admired like a desperate performer. He paused, then looked at her. Not as a man looks at a woman, but as something more measured, more deliberate. "Money," he said, "is often mistaken for instruction." The wind moved between them again, lifting the corner of the page. "It is not," he went on. "It is only amplification." Nyala held his gaze. Randolph stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that it felt like something shared rather than spoken. "A building," he said, "has a pulse." He tapped lightly against the table, not touching the designs, but near them. A quiet, rhythmic gesture. Most people never hear it. They arrive with their own noise, their own need to be seen, and they bury it. His eyes flicked briefly toward the house behind them. "But if You listen, rarely listen. There is something already there, a rhythm, a restraint, a kind of intention that existed before you arrived. Nyala felt something in her chest respond to that. Something she had never quite had words for. Randolph's gaze returned to her. The mistake, he said, is thinking you can create taste by spending. A pause. You cannot. He leaned in slightly, not close enough to touch, but close enough that his presence felt deliberate. You find the pulse, he said quietly, and then his lips curved faintly. You purchase it. Nyala frowned just slightly. Purchase? The pulse? From God himself, Randolph replied, as though the answer were obvious. At the right price. The words should have sounded absurd. They didn't. Not the way he said them. Not the way his eyes held hers when he did. Nyala swallowed, her voice softer now. And what is the price? Randolph straightened again, the moment passing as quickly as it came. Restraint, he said. Another interruption loomed, voices in the distance, but he ignored them this time. Instead, he looked down at her designs one last time, then back at her. Pack them up. The words landed without explanation. Nyala blinked. It's a pity, he continued, almost as an afterthought, his tone shifting into something cooler, more distant, that those without wealth are so often asked to define taste. Nyala felt the air change. Randolph's gaze drifted, not quite dismissive, but no longer engaged. It's like asking someone to describe a color they've never seen, he added. They may try. They may even believe themselves convincing. A small pause. But they are always guessing. The words settled heavily between them. Nyala didn't respond. didn't trust herself to. Randolph had already turned away. His body followed his decision slowly, but his attention had left completely. He walked back toward the house, toward the noise, toward the people waiting to be directed. And just like that, he was gone. Nyala stood there, her designs spread across the table, the wind moving through them like a question she didn't yet know the answer to. Miss. She turned. A young man stood a few steps behind her. His face was soft, almost boyish, as though time hadn't quite decided what to do with him yet. His suit hung slightly too large on his frame, the fabric worn at the edges, like something inherited or borrowed too often. He offered a small, polite smile. "You can leave," he said. Nyala frowned slightly. Mr. Denisova said he does that," the young man replied gently. "Speaks in conclusions without stating them." A beat. Then, "He accepts your designs." The words landed like something fragile. Nyala blinked. "He does." The young man nodded. "He'll see you tomorrow morning." For a moment, she said nothing. Then the reality of it began to rise. Slow, disbelieving, electric. "Oh," she breathed. The young man's smile widened just slightly, though it carried an empty banality to it, as though he'd seen that reaction before. "Congratulations," he said. Nyala gathered her designs, her movements quicker now, less careful, but no less precise. Her heart had shifted into something brighter, faster. Confusion lingered, but excitement began to outgrow it. "Thank you," she said, almost to herself. She turned toward the house, walking back through the marble corridors, past the workers, past the noise. But this time, it didn't press against her the same way. Something had changed. By the time she reached the front door, She was already imagining it. The look on her husband's face, the way she would say it, the way the words would feel leaving her mouth. She stepped outside into the open air, sunlight catching against her skin, her hair alive in the wind, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Their apartment held its breath differently, not like the house, wide and echoing with ambition, but close, familiar, filled with the quiet evidence of trying. A chipped mug left near the sink, a chair that leaned slightly to the left, curtains that softened the light instead of commanding it. Nyala stepped in, closing the door gently behind her. Minnow didn't look up at first. He sat at the small table by the window, shoulders broad beneath the worn shirt, his blonde hair falling just slightly into his eyes as he leaned toward his laptop. There was something about him that always struck her the same way, like a warrior misplaced into a quieter world. The kind of man who looked as though he belonged in storms, yet chose stillness. But tonight, the stillness didn't suit him. "I still haven't found anything," he said before she could speak. His voice was tight, frayed. It's like everything just stopped. Nyala lingered near the door, her hand still resting lightly against it. "I sent out proposals, follow-ups, calls." He let out a short, humorless breath. "Nothing. It's like shouting into a room that's already decided not to listen." She walked toward him slowly. He finally looked up. There was frustration in his eyes, but deeper than that, something quieter, something that had been building for longer than either of them wanted to name. "It's eating me," he admitted, softer now. Just sitting here, waiting to be needed." Nyala swallowed. The words she had carried all the way home. The excitement, the disbelief, the fragile brightness of them shifted inside her. Not gone, just postponed. She stepped behind him, placing her designs gently on the table before moving her hand to the back of his neck. Her touch was light, careful. He exhaled, leaning into it without thinking. "You'll find something," she said quietly. "You always do." Minnow shook his head slightly. "That's what I used to think." A pause. "Remember San Diego?" he added, his voice dipping into something heavier. "When I had 3 projects at once, I couldn't even keep track of calls. I had to turn people away." Nyala nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I thought that was normal," he continued, "that it meant something about me." His jaw tightened. Now I'm not so sure." Her fingers moved slowly against his skin, tracing small, grounding circles. "You're still that man," she said. But even as she said it, something in her resisted. A quiet, unspoken shift. Because she had seen something else now. Something bigger, sharper, a different kind of world. And standing in it had changed the way this one felt. Minnow reached up, covering her hand briefly with his. "I just need one break," he murmured. "One real one." Nyala forced a small smile. "Yes," she said softly. "You do." But the words she didn't say sat heavier. "You're already behind." The thought came uninvited and stayed. The car hummed beneath them, a shared compromise neither of them named out loud. Minnow drove, his hands steady on the wheel, though his movements carried a quiet impatience, like someone used to moving faster than life currently allowed. "I'll drop you and take care of a few errands," he said. "Follow up in person. People ignore emails." Nyala looked out the window. Sure. What? He asked, glancing at her. Nothing, she replied quickly. That sounds good. But it didn't. Not to her. She hated his errands. Hated what it implied. Movement without direction. Effort without weight. It felt like watching someone run in place and calling it progress. She didn't say any of that. Instead, she adjusted the sleeve of her dress and focused ahead. You'll do great, Minnow added. Just be you. Nyala nodded, but she was already wondering if that was still enough. The West Wing did not belong to the same house. It couldn't. Where yesterday had been dust and interruption, this was silence perfected. The floors gleamed without a single imperfection. The air carried no trace of construction, only something clean, deliberate, finished. Nyala slowed as she stepped inside. It felt complete, as though someone had taken a finished thought and placed it here, untouched by the chaos surrounding it. Miss Nyala, she turned. The same young man approached her, the one with the boyish face and the suit that didn't quite belong to him. Today it was pressed, but still slightly too large, as though he had grown into confidence faster than his clothes could follow. This way, he said with a smile. She followed. Through a short corridor, into a space that opened like a secret. An office, fully furnished, precise in its restraint, sat just beyond a large bedroom with open double doors. The bed was untouched, the room immaculate, as though waiting for a life that had not yet arrived. Randolph stood near the desk, phone to his ear. He didn't acknowledge her immediately. He didn't need to. Nyala stood where she was, her presence quiet but alert, her eyes moving across the space, absorbing every detail. Randolph spoke in low, measured tones, his voice carrying authority without effort. Yes, no, that won't be necessary. Then just adjust the terms. A pause. Good. He ended the call without ceremony and turned. Again, his eyes arrived before anything else. They settled on her with the same deliberate weight. Miss Nyala, he said, moving toward his desk. She inclined her head slightly. Mr. Denisova. He sat. Only then did he gesture for her to do the same. Nyala lowered herself into the chair opposite him, her posture composed, though something inside her remained alert, aware of him in a way she couldn't quite define. I had this wing duplicated, he said, almost casually, glancing around the room, from one of my other homes. Nyala blinked. Duplicated? Precisely, he replied. Every detail, every proportion. It saves time. She looked around again, seeing it differently now. Not as a finished vision, but as something borrowed, temporary. I intend for you to redesign it, along with the rest of the house, he added, from scratch. A beat, including the far east wing as well, which is also a duplicate. Nyala felt the scale of it settle in. Complete freedom. She kept her expression steady. That's a significant undertaking. Randolph watched her carefully. Yes, he said, it is. I'm impressed by your work, he continued. You understand restraint. That's rare. Something in her chest lifted. I'm very hands-on with my developments, he added, in all aspects of my work. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Nyala nodded. I prefer collaboration. His gaze lingered on her a moment longer than necessary. There was something in it now, something that made her aware of herself in a way that felt less professional. She shifted slightly in her seat, smoothing it over with composure. Good, he said. Then, I'd like to offer you the project. The words landed cleanly, direct. Nyala felt them before she fully processed them. Thank you, she said, her voice controlled, but something inside her lit, bright and immediate. There are conditions, he added. Of course there were. He leaned back slightly. The timeline is aggressive. How aggressive? She asked. Randolph's lips curved faintly. 6 weeks. Nyala stared at him. That's not possible, he finished for her. It is. Her mind raced. Calculations, logistics, scale. It would require constant presence, he continued. Daily, late nights, full immersion. Nyala inhaled slowly. That would be demanding, she said carefully. Randolph's gaze didn't waver. The compensation, he said, will make every version of your life before this feel like preparation. Something inside her surged, bright, dangerous. For a moment, she saw it. What that kind of money meant. What it could change. Then, Minnow, his hands on the steering wheel, his voice from the night before. I just need one break. Nyala's chest tightened. Randolph stood. The meeting, it seemed, was already ending. We'll formalize details this afternoon. Talk to TC on your way out, he said, already reaching for his phone. And then, before she could stop herself, I want to manage my own team. The words came out sharper than she intended. Randolph paused. Slowly, he looked back at her, not casually this time, not distantly, deeply, as though measuring something far beyond the request itself. I have someone in mind, she added, steadier now. A project manager, someone capable. Silence stretched. Randolph stepped closer to the desk again, resting his hands lightly against its surface. This is not a charity. I have people you can use, he said. I know, she replied. His eyes held hers. If you fail, he continued, it will not be shared. A pause. It will be yours. Nyala didn't look away. I understand. Another silence. Then a small shift in his expression. Approval, or something close to it. Very well, he said. If you're willing to risk your reputation, build your team. The words unlocked something in her. Excitement rushed in, fast and overwhelming. Thank you, she said, unable to fully contain it now. Randolph had already turned slightly, attention drifting back toward the rest of his day. Tomorrow, he said, we begin properly. Nyala stood, gathering herself, but instead she was already moving faster, brighter. This was it. The break, the shift, the thing that changed everything. As she walked out, the young man gave her a small, knowing look. She barely noticed, because all she could think about was getting back to Minnow and telling him everything. Miss Nyala. She turned just as she reached the threshold of the West Wing. The world of marble and silence beginning to loosen its grip on her. The young man stood there again, closer now. Before you go, he said. There was something unhurried about him, not slow in thought, but in movement, as though time pressed firmly against him, and it did against everyone else in this place. I didn't introduce myself yesterday. A small pause. TC. Nyala studied him properly this time. Up close, he was harder to place. His face carried youth, yes, but not the kind that belonged to a specific age. It hovered somewhere uncertain, softened by something that wasn't quite innocence and wasn't quite experience. His green eyes caught the light in a way that felt almost misplaced here, too vivid for a world built on polished restraint. Nyala, she replied, though he already knew. I know, he said, that same mild smile touching his lips. It didn't quite reach his eyes, or perhaps it did, just differently. There was a drag to his gaze, a slow, drifting quality, as though he saw things slightly after they happened. Not inattentive, just removed, like someone watching from a seat just outside the moment. You'll need to be back at sundown, he continued. I'll have the paperwork ready by then. Nyala nodded. All right. He tilted his head slightly, studying her in a way that felt less invasive than Randolph's, but no less curious. You'll get used to it, he added. To what? This place, he said simply. Nyala glanced back toward the office, toward the man who seemed to shape everything within it. I'm not sure anyone gets used to this, she said. TC's smile shifted. No, he agreed. Not really. And yet, he stood there like someone who had, or someone who had stopped trying. There was a looseness in him that didn't belong here. Not just in his slightly ill-fitting suit, or the way his hands rested too casually at his sides, but in the way he seemed untouched by the urgency that defined everything else. Big decisions moved through this house like weather systems, and he stood beneath them as though they were clouds that might pass or might not, but would never quite reach him. Nyala felt it then. He didn't belong to the machine, but he wasn't resisting it either, just existing beside it. See you at sundown, he said gently. Bring your project manager. And then he stepped aside, letting her leave. Minnow didn't speak at first when she got into the car. He glanced at her once, then pulled away from the curb. "Well?" he asked after a moment. Nyala looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second she hesitated again, but this time the excitement pushed through. "I got it." Minnow's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "The project?" She nodded, unable to stop the small smile that formed. "They offered it to me this morning." A beat, then. "That's incredible," he said. And it was. But something in his tone didn't land where she expected it to. "There's more," she added quickly. "They're giving me full control. I get to build my own team." Minnow glanced at her again. "Full control," he repeated. "Yes." She leaned slightly toward him, the energy in her voice rising now. "And I want you to run it." The car seemed to slow, not physically, but in feeling. Minnow's expression shifted. "Run it," he said. "As project manager," she clarified. "It's a massive building, Minnow. I need someone I trust, someone who understands how I work." He let out a small breath. "And that someone is me." Nyala frowned slightly. "Of course it is." Minnow nodded. "But it wasn't agreement. Not fully." "That would mean," he said carefully, "I'd be working under you." The words sat there, sharper than they needed to be. Nyala felt irritation rise, quick and unwelcome. "It would mean we'd be working together," she corrected. He gave a small, tight smile. "Right." A pause. "I just didn't picture it that way." Nyala turned toward the window. "Well, this is how it is," she said. Silence stretched between them. Then Minnow exhaled. softer this time. No, hey, he said, adjusting his tone. It's a good thing. A great thing. I'm proud of you. The words came smoother now, more practiced. Nyala nodded, but something in her had already shifted.